Hey, Michael here again with trainingwithmichael.com. Hey, we're coming back at you talking about goals. If you watched the last video, I hope you did. Be sure and watch Smart Goal Setting before you watch this video. But today we want to talk about hitting those SMART goals. I hear a lot about goal setting. I hear a lot about how you should write your goals, that you should write them with feeling. I hear people say you should write them in past tense, as if you've already accomplished them. I hear people say you need to read them twice a day. All of those things I agree with. Now, we didn't talk about that last time. I think the most important thing is to make them SMART goals. But what I don't hear a lot about is the specific way that you go about actually hitting those SMART goals. Because I've met a lot of people in life who do a real good job reading their goal statement every day or twice a day and rewriting it every few months, but they don't ever seem to hit it. They don't ever seem to accomplish those goals, as if they get their fulfillment out of reading the statement. But listen, get your fulfillment out of attaining those goals. And if you don't hit your goals, remember SMART goals, they have to be time sensitive. If you don't hit that goal on your date that you set, then you've got to look backwards to find out why. But listen, if you take my advice right now, you're going to hit those goals. I'm telling you, you listen to me, you listen to what I'm teaching you right now, and no matter what goal you set, as long as it's SMART, you're going to hit it. Or in the least, you can readjust to make sure you hit it. Now remember what SMART means. We're just using that as an acrostic. It means that your goal is specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic, and it's time sensitive. That's a SMART goal. It's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. And remember last time I told you that that last letter, that T, that time sensitive part, was one of the most important parts of that analogy. You have got to set yourself a date. You've got to set yourself a deadline. And it is this deadline that we're going to be able to use to help you hit those SMART goals. Now let me just explain this to make sure you know what I'm saying. Last time we talked about, we used the analogy that you wanted to make a lot of money. This time, since I'm mainly talking with multi-level marketers, network marketers, although this fits with anybody, any kind of profession. This time, let's talk about sponsoring people. Let's say you want to set a SMART goal of the amount of people that you need to sponsor. So you say something like this: I want to sponsor 60 people. Okay, so that's specific. It's I want to sponsor people. It's measurable, right? Because you want to sponsor 60. So by the time your deadline comes, if you sponsored 58, you know you didn't hit your goal. If you sponsored 55, you know you didn't hit your goal. You were close, and that's awesome. But if you sponsored 2, you got some work to do, don't you? So let's make it SMART go. It's specific. I want to sponsor people. It's measurable. I want to sponsor 60 people. And you know what? That is also attainable and realistic, because many of above average, you're going to have to be an above average network marketer to do that. But there's training out there. There's training there at trainingwithmichael.com. There's ways that you can learn to do that. And here's time sensitive. I want to do it by December 31st, 2011. Now I'm making this training here in late 2010, so let's just use 2011. You say, hey, I'm going to start in January on this goal. I want to sponsor 60 people by December 31st, 2011. That is a very SMART goal. It's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive. Now here's how you hit it. Listen, you got to we're going to look at this letter T, this time sensitive. And in this analogy, it's December 31st. So you start there. You can do this with pretty much any program, right? You can just print yourself an annual calendar where you can see all of the months out here in front of you. You can go to the store and buy one. It doesn't matter how you obtain it. A lot of times the companies will send you those little free ones. However you do it, you can look it up online, but you need to print yourself an annual calendar when you're sitting down and making your goals. So I've got to look at December 31st here, right? December 31st. December 31st is my deadline. Now, here's the key. If I want to sponsor 60 people by December 31st, I've got to start figuring out some math here, right? There's 12 months in a year. If I want to sponsor 60 people in 12 months, that means I have to sponsor 5 people a month. I call these stepping stones. What you need to try to do is to get your stepping stones down to what you need to do, and here's where we're going, every day. See, if I want to sponsor 60 people in 12 months, that means I've got to be doing something every day. But here's where this just gets beautiful. If I don't do it every day, my deadline changes. Let's flesh that out. December 31st, I want to sponsor 60 people. What that means is I want to sponsor 5 people a month, right? How many weeks are there in a month? Well, most months there's 4 weeks in the month. So I got to sponsor 1 1/4 people a week. I got to sponsor 1 1/4 people a week. 5-week months, I got to sponsor 1 a month. So when you get to the end of January 1 and you haven't sponsored your 1 1/4 person, guess what? Your time-sensitive ending deadline goal goes into 2012. If in order for me to sponsor 60 people in a year, meaning I have to sponsor 5 people in a month or 1 1/4 people a week, as soon as I don't sponsor that 1 1/4 person after the end of the first week, my goal, my time-sensitive goal, has to be moved 1 week on the other end. Now, you might say, well, January, I live in the north, or I live in Alaska, I live in the northern New England states, and nobody does anything. It's dark all the time. There's snow everywhere. So most of my sponsoring is going to be done in February and March. But listen, you can't do that. You know what that's called? That's called procrastination. That's called putting things off. And when you do that, you're never going to hit your goals. You have got to adjust the other end. You've got to adjust the other end. Now, how does this become so beneficial? Let me tell you how it becomes beneficial. When you don't sponsor that person in that first week of January of 2011 and you have to move it 1 week, that's one thing. But when you get into February and you haven't sponsored anyone yet, and your goal has to be moved 2 months into 2012, into February 2012, and then March, you see, you start to ask yourselves a question. What do I need to do to hit this goal? And you can do that with anything. You can even narrow that down even further, can't you? You can say, well, if I have to sponsor 1 1/4 people a week, and in my opportunity, and in the business that I'm in, the sponsor ratio, let's throw one out there, is 14-to-1, meaning I have to make 14 contacts or show 14 business plans before I sponsor one. What does that mean? That means in the first week of January, you've got to contact or show 14 plans. If it's 14-to-1, and by the way, that's the sponsoring ratio for the folks in my company that are kind of doing it the old-fashioned way. If you have to show 14 people to sponsor one, that means you have to show the plan 14 times, probably about 16 times, right? Because we're doing 1 1/4 a week. You got to show the plan 14, 15, 16 times in the first week of January. So if you don't show it 14, 15, 16 times, you're not going to sponsor the one. You can even narrow it down further than that. If I've got to make 10 phone calls to make one appointment, and I need 14 appointments, you have to make 140 phone calls the first week in January. You see what you're doing? You're taking this lofty goal, you're bringing it down to the nuts and bolts, the nitty-gritty of life, so you realize what you have to do. If you're doing this business the old-fashioned way, meeting people in restaurants and stores and cold calling and cold contacting, then you're going to have to put in the grime. And that way works, by the way. It works. It's just a long way to do it. But you're going to have to be working, putting in the long haul, picking up the phone, making those calls. 140 phone calls your first week in January to show 14 plans to sponsor one person. At the end of January, the first week of January, if you haven't done that, your goal on the other end has got to be moved a week. If you don't do that in the second week, your goal on the other end has got to be moved in a week. We're now into the second week of 2012. You don't do it the third week, your goal on the other end has to be moved a week. Fourth week, you got to move it. Fifth week, you got to move it. If you sponsor, let's say you sponsor 2 people in January instead of the 5 that you had shot for, then you don't have to move it quite as far. See, you're going to constantly be moving that goal back and forth, or that deadline back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Let's say you don't sponsor anybody the first week and you have to move it a week, and the second week and you have to move it a week, and the third week and you have to move it a week. But in the fourth week, you sponsor 3. Well, you get to come back 2, right? You went ahead 3 and back 2 because you made up for it a little bit in the last week. But listen, if you do that, you're going to be able to adjust and readjust. And I'm telling you, if you'll follow that simple technique, you will hit your goals. You might have to adjust them. You might have to readjust them. You might have to move them. You might have to get them back and forth on the calendar. But if you use that simple technique, you will hit your goals. We'll see you next time.